Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order our the Board of Finance regular meeting for Thursday, February 17th, 2022. First item on the agenda is public forum. Is there anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to item number 2. Approve minutes of our regular meeting minutes of January 18th, 2022. Do we hear a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or corrections? On page 6, I had just at the top half, at the very top, misspelling on my name. In the second paragraph, the third line that starts the amount, would like to change it if I could, just to refer to the insurance line. I don't want there to be an assumption of what the amount was. So I know we were talking about insurance, but I would just say the total amount of the insurance line being proposed in the budget is still 15% less than what was budgeted in 16-17. And then there was just a small misspelling at the end of that paragraph. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Does anybody have anything else to add? Okay, hearing nothing further, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
One abstention, Mike.
Thank you, John. Agenda item number 3, correspondence. Let's see, standing building committee minutes. This evening, I did receive a couple days ago that the chairman, David DeMeo, would not be able to join us since this is actually an odd night, Thursday night to meet. He had a conflict, so I just passed on if there were any comments or questions regarding the standing building committee minutes of February 1st, I would pass them on to him. Does anybody have any items to address standing building? I did not see any myself. So.
I'm good.
Great. I did notice that a lot of projects, as we had mentioned or alluded to last month, a lot of projects are coming close to being completed. So this agenda or their meeting minutes will probably get a little bit smaller as time goes on, but they're coming to conclusion on a lot of these. On correspondence, item number 2, pension committee minutes, monthly report or the investment report. Anything on either one of those?
No.
Nothing like racing right through tonight. That's fantastic. Guess we all know we have a big agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. First Selectman, go ahead.
I think you'll see later on that the pension committee did recommend that that we proceed with lowering the discount rate, the assumed discount rate from 6% to 5.5%.
Yes.
Which will be covered later in my presentation, but just wanted to make sure you guys are aware, you folks are aware that that was a recommendation from the pension committee. So thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Matt, did you say 5.5% or is it
No, 5 3/4. Sorry, 5 3/4.
That's what I thought.
Right, yeah. Item 9.5, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the correction, Veronica. Okay, and nothing in the investment report. Slight uptick. Snapshot, a daily snapshot, right? As Mary Jane likes to say. All right. On item number 3, OPEB board minutes, monthly report. Anything on either of those, either the minutes or the report? Okay. Moving on. Item number 4, review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for January 2022. We will hand the floor over to Arnold Scretta, who will be the reviewer tonight for us, and Linda Trudeau. So Arnold, take it away.
All right, good evening, everybody. The expenditures for the month of January 2022 were $5,197,505.89. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of January were 55.88% of the budget, which is roughly equivalent to what it was in the prior years. Revenue for the month of January was $19,267.95. That included $14,402 from preschool tuition, as well as $4,865.95 from Medicaid. The warrant that we are submitting to the Board of Finance today is the total of all payments is $2,285,422.86. The most notable expense on there, at least for a single item, is $410,770.50 to Bank of America Public Capital Corp. This was for the Energy Performance Contract 2022 annual. Obviously, that contract was entered into before my time on the board, but it was to reduce the school system's energy spend, which included infrastructural investments. Also of note, tuition excise grant payments. That's the reimbursements that the school system is getting. We're more or less at about 82%, which is very good coming back from the state. There's still another payment to come. That secondary payment might be lower, so we don't know yet that 82% is going to be the final number. It probably won't be for those reimbursements, but so far so good. That's my point. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Great, thank you, Arnold. Appreciate it. Questions for the Board of Education? I also would note, because I usually forget, we also got a tuition report this afternoon from Linda, so hopefully you all got it. Had a chance to review it this afternoon for the meeting, but we did get it, so thank you, Linda.
That report is slightly less than what we were projecting before for being under budget. As we've noted before, this is a very volatile line and can change quite frequently. I did adjust the excess cost estimate on that report, but I did not go up to 82% because I highly doubt that that number is going to hold. So I went from the 72% up to 76% reimbursement. And hopefully, well, we won't find out until the end of May what the final reimbursement rate will be.
Yeah, I did note that the last month it was $345,000 that there was looking again under budget. However, that's now changed, about $110,000 less
Right.
now.
Right. As we get, so there were some bills that we were further behind on, and as the actual bills come in, we have to adjust our projection because some of them we just don't know exactly what they're going to be. We know the base rate, but we don't know some of the added costs.
Regarding purchase services, there were just a couple of lines that seem to be a little bit outliers. Just from the last couple of years, it's actually been very helpful to have those 2 years from 2020, 2021, and 2022 now because of the pandemic and how it affected last year. But I noticed in professional technical services, we're running it, I believe I see the number is 92%, whereas previous years were much lower. That line item postage, which isn't a big amount, but that seems to be running higher. And service to machines which is running higher. I'm just curious if that's just catch up from last year or if there's been cost increases on any of those items. If you want me to repeat it, it was professional technical services, postage, and service to machine. Those were the three.
Professional and technical services, there's some charges in there that will be reimbursed from a grant, but we had to pay the bills and submit proof of payment, and we will get payment back for those. That was for a video that is being done for recruitment of teachers. And so we will get those funds back. That account should come back in line to where it has been. Postage is really just a timing of when we fill meters. There's 3 or 4 big meters in the district, and it all depends on when we fill them with postage funds. What was the last one? I'm sorry.
It was service to machines.
That one I don't know anything specific on. I can get back to you on it. I don't want to misspeak on it.
Again, they're not big amounts, but it went from 47 to like 50 and then 77. So I'm just curious what the uptick was on that one. And it could just be timing. I just was curious. Other than that, I didn't have anything else that stood out. Anybody else on the board?
I had a question.
Jeff, go ahead.
Tutors is running a little bit, about 15% lower. This is in salaries. It's running about 15% lower than the last 2 years. Is there any reason for that? Or is it just a timing issue?
There are some tutors that are being covered by a grant. I don't know if there's been a change in the number of tutors or how much we are doing tutoring. I could follow up on that one, but I know there is some funds from a grant that's covering some of those expenses.
Some of that is coming out of the ESSER grant, and I would speculate, I'll need to talk to Mr. Scanziano, but with schools not in the hybrid model that they were with less virtual instruction, I would venture that we're just doing a little bit less of it this year. The year before, I'd want to go back and talk to Mr. Scanziano about that. It might be that we've moved some of the expense to the ESSER grants.
Great, thanks.
Linda, I just was going to ask you about the insurance line on purchase services. You might have already mentioned it. I'm not sure if I caught it, but it's just running a little high. And I wonder if we knew what was driving that line. And then maybe another question about equipment, instructional, and capital.
So the biggest change in the insurance line is the cyber liability policy that we paid for this year that we did not budget for. It was a new addition this year. So that's why that line's a little bit higher. And then the equipment line, instructional, that is some of the purchases from the technology lease and capital lease that we will get back from the leasing company once we pay the bills and submit them for reimbursement.
You did mention that already. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further? I'm scanning and I'm seeing nothing. No hands. No one jockeying in the position to try to ask questions.
Any idea when we might get another donation from Coca-Cola? I keep putting in my codes and having it go to the Guilford public school system. I drink a can every day to do my part to keep the school's lights on.
Very much appreciated on our side.
Thank you, Mary Jane.
Mary Jane's got your back today. Is there anything on the minutes operations? There's a lot of minutes that are here. I know that there were we had our joint meeting where there was lots of discussion, the public hearings on the 24th and 25th. So we have a lot of documentation here of January. So I know there was a lot to read, but all very important as we go into the budget. All right, if no one else has any other questions for Linda and Arnold. got off pretty easily on Arnold. Maybe not so much next time. So be ready.
I'll do
Yeah.
my homework.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice job. Nice job, by the way. I'll entertain a motion to accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for January 2022 in the amount of $5,197,505.89.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Great. Thank you both. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Arnold. Item number 5, review and approve a report of expenditures for town government for January 2022. Mary Jane, I will let you take the floor.
Good evening.
I'm assuming revenues.
Sure, we're going to start with revenues. I just want to note that I too added a column for January 31, 2020 for both revenues and expenditures. So if you look at the revenues, you'll see that on bottom line, we're trending about the same every year, in the approximately 90% as of the end of January. But what you'll notice in the detail is some of the numbers have gone way up and some of them have gone way down, and they're all an effect of COVID. We've talked about that, for all of the land use items, for many of the services that have gone way up, as opposed to some of the things that are down, like interest rates and youth and family services. But I just wanted to show you that we are trending pretty much where we've been each year, even throughout COVID. I don't know if you have any specific questions on revenue.
Speaking of youth and family services, Mary Jane, why, if they're seeing so many more people, why are their revenues so much lower? Is it because their clients don't have the ability to pay?
Well, their revenue's actually up in 2022 compared to the last 2 years.
I see. I picked up the wrong column. My apologies.
Do you think golf is down because of COVID? I would have thought maybe get outside, stay 6 feet apart, get the ball around.
Well, you'll see golf is still up in comparison to 2020, but not as high as 2021, when all you could do was go out and golf at that point. So we are still trending a little higher.
Okay, good point.
But not quite
Yeah,
as
other
high as
activities
last
are
year.
kind of loosened up a bit. Yeah, I follow you.
Right. So
Makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, when we established the revenue projections for the golf course in 2019 for that 2020 year, we had no idea what was coming in the following year. So those numbers are really, it's not good to compare year over year based on what we had budgeted and what we did this year, because we budgeted significantly higher amount than we had in previous years.
Right. Yeah, I was just gonna mention that. Thank you. Yes. It also was it was also a milder winter, so a lot more people were going out in January, but it was when you compare it to the budget, yeah, we blew away the budget that year. This past year we budgeted higher. So
what kind of revenues are included in the other departmental? Because that's way up from the 2020 numbers.
Other departmental is other state grants. So we have an extra grant. You'll hear in our budget presentation regarding a couple new grants that we received this year. One that's already come in is unbudgeted grant, so therefore our percentage seems higher.
Mr. Chairman, there are a bunch of things in there. It's reimbursements from the state, tax relief for the elderly. There's pilot funds in there, town road, town aid road, and then some, as Mary Jane just mentioned, some other municipal grants.
Thank you.
yeah, but when Matt does the budget presentation, those will be more easily seen on which categories.
Absolutely. We specifically call out the additional grants that we're receiving.
Anything further on revenues from the board? Okay, expenditures.
So same thing on expenditures. I do have the three columns. Our expenditures are up a little bit in 2022. If you remember, we do have additional capital expenditures that have been going out that will be covered by other funding. So that is helping drive up our percentage, along with the debt retirement interest. Looks like we've really skyrocketed from last year to this year. What happened is the draw for the next round of interest was due on February 1st, but they took it on January 31st. So it was just a timing issue, which throws off that percentage.
Good point.
But anybody have any specific questions on the expenditures?
I don't see anything on my end. I guess we can move on then to warrants. Any of them? Warrants, 217 weekly warrants or special fund warrants? Anybody have anything on warrants? I did not have any notes on mine.
Just had the one question. I think I saw the thing for the American Rescue Plan consultant. That was the new business consulting thing that we were looking at a month or two ago.
Was that $25,000?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the pilot coaching project that's being
Okay.
done by the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. That's what it was. And it went out. Got it.
Yes.
I had one. There was an item on page 5 of the regular warrants at the top. It was a $12,000 expense for tasers. Is that one taser is $12,000, or is that a bunch of them, or is that servicing?
Yep. I'm sorry. Did you say top is to page 5?
Page 5.
Got it. Okay.
The Axon Enterprise. I was just.
I believe I'll have to get back to you on that, but I believe we have a contract that pays a certain amount every year. Yeah, that's what I thought, 5-year contract for that.
Okay.
So it's a number of tasers that we're just paying over 5 years.
I see. Okay.
Anything else on warrants? And medical. So in summary on medical, we had another higher month than projected. I did note that I believe that we went down by about, I wrote the number down somewhere because I was curious regarding the fund balance. I think we went down about 250. Was it 250? I think we went down in the fund balance from last month.
Probably, yeah. We're projecting a fund balance surplus of only $122,000 at this point.
Yeah, I was looking more at the total fund balance where we were last month to this month, but in looking at the trend from December to January, I think it's one of those we're all cognizant of. That
yeah, it's about 250. It's about 250,000. You'll see it's the difference between what went out in January and what we would budget. So we had a total of 1.4 go out, and almost 1.4, and budgeted only 1.1. So that difference, it would be coming out of fund balance. So that's what brought down the surplus. It was
Right.
not a good month for us, especially when we were looking at our projections for next year.
Right.
I thought it was interesting that the December number and the January number are like the same, but I guess the claims and the administration subtotals are different.
Right. Yeah, if the math
I
is
thought
right
that was
there,
kind of
yeah.
interesting.
Mr. Chairman, I just pulled January's numbers and you're correct. It's down about 257,000.
Mhm.
Yeah, it would be the difference between the actual and the budgeted.
With, yeah, and just noting 19% of the ISL is spent.
And I did add, if you look just above the ISL,
Yes.
since I usually report it, I figured I would just add it to my report. There were 14 people over the 75,000, which is the first column of claims, and we have 3 people over the 150, which is the amount covered in the second column. So I thought I would, since I report that, I might as well just put it on there, and we can track it as we go.
No, I
Do
think
those do those numbers lag a little bit, or are those right up to date with January? The ISL numbers.
They're as close to the end of January as I can get.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not an exact science, but close.
I thought maybe with the heavy costs we saw in December and January, maybe a few more are going to get over the limits and get an ISL benefit. But if it's up to date, then we've already got it all in there.
I have a strange feeling we'll be talking more about insurance, medical insurance, in this meeting. But
Yeah.
that's a snapshot as of the end of January.
I don't know about Guilford, but my roof feels like it's going to blow off. It's so windy here in East Haddam.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, is it? Okay.
Okay, anything else for Mary Jane on anything that has to do with town revenues, expenditures, warrants, or the monthly projection on medical? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town government for January 2022 in the amount of $3,822,236.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, recusals. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Jane. Now we move into item number 6, which is to receive the proposed Board of Education budget for fiscal year 2022-2023. I believe as part of our meeting tonight, we have Superintendent Dr. Freeman, Board of Education Chairwoman Katie Bell-Stracy, members of the Board of Education, and I believe Katie, I don't know if it's going to be yourself or Dr. Freeman who will start off, but I'll let you take it from here.
I'll say a word or two, and then I'm going to pass it to Dr. Freeman. Good evening, everyone. We, as a Board of Ed, received a draft budget from Dr. Freeman at the beginning of January. Have spent the last month kind of poring over that budget. Deliberating, we held 2 public comments, as mentioned before, on January 24th and 25th. We heard some requests. We hear this every year about some support for some sports teams. We had some comments kind of in support of the budget in general. I've been on the board for 10 plus years. We've had some public comments that have lasted well into the evening. This was a quieter public comment, I would say, but we did hear also from a number of people by email, which was helpful. We on Monday did our final deliberations on this budget. and really carefully went line by line through a number of items, thinking carefully about a couple of things. In particular, one is, again, recognizing the impact of the pandemic on our students from an educational standpoint, an instructional standpoint, and a mental health standpoint. So one of the things you're going to see in this budget is a continued commitment to both of those things. You're going to see a couple of people representing resources to provide additional support for kids in both of those areas. We are conscious of the fact that this is a higher percentage budget than we have brought to you, certainly I think in my 10 years. But as mentioned, we, and you will obviously hear this from the town as well, are really being impacted by an increase in the medical benefits line this year, which is accounting for 2.4% of the increase alone. With benefits and salaries, which you know is approximately 80% of our budget, contractual salary increases and increases in medical benefits got us starting at a 4.18% increase. We did pay attention to what we heard from our colleagues on the Board of Selectmen in their meeting on February 7th, learning that the grand list this year could help, certainly, as both the town and the budget are experiencing these higher than typical increases in our budgets. That is certainly reassuring because it's very important to us to pay close attention to the taxpayers in our community who support us. So we are bringing to you a budget that we feel was really carefully crafted when it was brought to us. We deliberated over a number of items and took some reductions, again, with our community members in mind. We prioritized in the reductions that the Board of Ed took, we prioritized people. So really tried to hold on to the positions that, again, I think are going to support our children instructionally and from a mental health standpoint in the way that we think is particularly important. So thank you tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci and Mr. Ailes. If it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and share my screen and share some slides with the board.
Absolutely.
And is everybody seeing the slideshow?
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Balistraci. Thank you, Mr. Ailes, Board of Finance, for hosting us tonight. We are pleased to bring this budget forward to you. I will not spend reading these first slides to you, but I share them with you to remind the board and to remind the community that the budget does not come out of whole cloth. The budget evolves from the history of the priorities that we have been working on in the Guilford Public Schools across years now. It builds specifically from the specific initiatives on which we're working this year. Each year as we go into the budget build, we build on assumptions which basically push us in the direction of a zero budgeting exercise. We don't ask for new resources until we've looked at how we can use existing resources. And the focus of the budget is first to ensure that we're providing a safe and healthy environment. And then second, to make sure that we're focused on instruction and learning. And this year specifically, that means focusing on an accelerated learning approach for bringing our students through the impact that the pandemic has had on them academically. There is a focus on their social and emotional wellness. This is important overall, but we know that, again, this has been impacted by the pandemic, and the board continues to have a focus on equity and social justice. As we build our budget, all of these concerns, all of these areas are part of that consideration. Importantly, we review enrollment and enrollment projections going into next year. We only budget for the students that we expect to see in front of us next year. You will see that we are projecting, again, a slight decrease in enrollment. We project to be down 46 students, but as always, I will remind you that that is 46 students spread across 13 grade levels and 7 different locations. I would actually draw the board's attention to the last 3 or 4 years at the elementary levels. And what we are beginning to see, we believe, at the elementary level is a leveling off of the decline. The numbers seem to be leveling off at the elementary levels and perhaps establishing what will be the new expectation moving forward. I would remind the board that while we've been experiencing this decline, it is not as precipitous as some other communities are experiencing or what we expected to experience based on the demographic study that we had completed some years ago. All of that said, the Board of Education brings forward to you tonight a proposed budget for school year 22-23 of $65,629,734. This would be an increase over the current fiscal year of $3,233,834, or a percent increase of 5.1%. To put that into historical context, this is the single largest increase that the Board of Education has requested from the town in 10 years. I would draw your attention to the last 6 years on this history, where we have been trending below 2%, and in fact, well below 2% for the last 6 years. There's a number of reasons why the request this year comes in at this level, and we will highlight those as we move forward tonight. I also want to share the history of medical spending. I want to point out that the medical cost this year is what will be driving this budget. You've heard it already in the meeting tonight. I'm sure you'll hear it. I know you'll hear it several times from me and continue to hear it through the meeting. However, it's important to note that while we are experiencing that significant increase in medical this year, year over year, we still won't be matching the level of spending as in the 16-17 year. We've done good work on medical benefits. The board has negotiated all of our benefit agreements. We've moved all of our employees to high deductible health plans. It is just that this year we have had historical experiences that are pushing this increase, and Anthem's change in how they are costing stop loss is pushing this significant change. To be really specific about that, the medical increase by itself represents 1.4 million of a total increase in this budget of 3.2 million. Were it not for the medical increase, we'd be bringing forward a budget increase to you this year. If we were flat in medical, as we have been in many of the last years, we'd be talking about a total increase of 1.7 million, not 3.2. We'd be talking about a percent increase to this budget of 2.7%, which is close to the historical that we've been bringing to you. It is at the 5.18 because of that medical increase in large part. As always, I do want to highlight a number of efficiencies in this budget. It is not just increasing costs. We have continued to do well in the special education area. We have reduced tuition spending as a single line item over this current budget year. And we have stabilized special ed spending sort of in aggregate over the last several years. And I'll show you that in just a moment in a little bit more detail. Salaries, as always, a significant portion of our budget, about 60%, goes into salaries. We are a people-intense organization. We spend our money on the people who support our students. This budget does account for 2 retirements, and we expect to recognize savings in those 2 retirements. That's a relatively conservative number because we are being impacted by a teacher shortage and a labor shortage in general, and we do have concerns. We did not put a more aggressive retirement savings in there. And then, as always, when we bring in new positions or suggest new positions, we work on the existing team and we look at ways to get more out of that. So as we talk about a new position in this budget, an instructional coach, I will talk a little bit about how we have restructured existing coaching positions to get more than 1 FTE's impact from the FTE that we're asking to include. And then again, I need to give credit to our building principals and to our department area leads who simply are working really hard to keep costs down. When we look at supplies, materials, equipment, the principals and the department leads are doing their part to make sure that we keep those costs down. We want to ensure that our students have everything they need, but we don't want to spend unnecessarily. I know that the board is familiar with this graphic, this visual, and just again to highlight the work that we've been doing around special education. The blue line indicates our budgeted amounts every year going back historically, and the red line indicates our actual spend in those same years. You will see that in the last 3 to 4 years, we have brought the budget up to where it needs to be so that we are not consistently running over budget and needing to draw money for special education from other budget lines. But just as important, when you look at the actual spend, you'll see that we have begun to level out the actual spend. And from 17-18 through to next year, you see a much flatter line in that area than we had anticipated in the past. I give significant credit to that, to Mr. Scanziano, who has been working really well to try to make sure that we are, again, providing our students with every service that they need, but trying to be able to predict and plan for those better. To have 2 years consecutively where we expect to run under budget in tuition and special education as a whole is really good news, and we're particularly proud of that. I do think the story of this year's budget, however, is more about cost drivers than about the efficiencies that we are able to build into this budget. And the cost drivers this year are significant. Again, we're going to mention this over and over again, but that medical line, when you combine the medical line with other insurances, with other benefits, including the OPEB cost, we're seeing an increase in the benefit area of $1.6 million. When you look at contractual salary increases that we are committed to, that we are obligated to, you're seeing an increase of $980,000. In my recollection, this is the first time that salary increases was not the single largest driving factor in our budget. Again, we're all about the people. It is usually the salaries that drive the increases overall. This year, it's that benefit increase. It's the hit to the medical line. In addition to that single driving factor, however, and we do have increases in salaries, there's a number of other areas that are increasing, and to large degree, they're impacted by the inflation that we're all seeing in our home budgets as well. We do have an increase in our transportation contract that was negotiated some years ago. That's not related to that, but a number of the other ones are. Increases in things like fuel and heating oil. Linda mentioned the cyber liability insurance. We are paying for that this year, but next year we plan on budgeting for that cost. So that is a new budgeted cost coming into this. We're seeing an increase in legal costs in a number of areas this year. The pandemic has created labor conversations. We've had to do some negotiations around changing work conditions. The pandemic has created some additional special education costs around in the legal line, and in the area of freedom of information requests. If the number of requests that we experienced over this last year didn't triple, it absolutely doubled. We've seen a significant increase in the number and in the complexity of those requests, and many of those have required a legal spend as well. There's an increase for school lunch debt. That is a new requirement at the state level. We are no longer allowed to carry lunch debt over from one year to the next. We have to write that off each year, and that's an increased cost. The drivers identified on this page alone would represent a 2.8% increase. And again, I wanted to note that the total budget increase is going up at 3.2%. This page, these items, are the real story behind this year's budget. Having said that, however, there are discretionary investments in this budget as well. I have said over and over again that I don't believe that I was invited to be part of Guilford Public Schools to maintain the status quo. Every year, we believe our job is to improve the instruction in the school district, to improve the experience for students in the schools. And this year in particular, we are responding to the continuing impacts of the pandemic. So there are investments in this budget. There is a cost for 2.4 FTEs at the high school. This is directly in response to a new state mandate. Beginning next year, the state is requiring an additional 1 credit mastery-based exhibit of student learning. It is a graduation requirement. We must provide it. We believe that we can design the best experience for students around that mandate if we bring in an additional 2.4 teachers to provide that experience. We're still working on the design. We ran a first semester of the program this past semester, and we are collecting feedback from students and parents, so we'll continue to shape that. But there will be an expense to it, and it will involve teachers to monitor and to support the students through that work. There's a classroom teacher needed at Cox. That is in simple response to enrollment. We have 2 4th grades that are graduating out of Cox, but we anticipate filling 3 full kindergartens coming in behind them. So we will need to add 1 classroom position. There is a district-wide social worker. That social worker is currently working in district already, but the salary is being covered by the ESSER grant. The ESSER grant this year is paying for 2 social workers as well as an English language teaching position. We believe it is prudent to try to slowly move some of those positions out of the grant and into the base operational budget so that when the grant sunsets, we are not forced with a forced choice of either placing all 3 of those positions into 1 budget year at significantly larger cost, or having to let those positions go and losing that service to students. So again, there are 3 positions, 3 teaching positions in the grant this year. This would move 1 of them out of the grant and bring that position into the base budget. There's an increased special ed teacher. This is in direct response to seeing increased identifications. This teacher would be spending time at both Baldwin Middle School as well as Lakes, working with an increase in identified students in those areas. There is an instructional coach in this position, specifically an instructional coach that would lean into the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics areas. The board knows that we have been building the coaching cohort over the last 12 years. We have brought literacy instruction through the elementary and all the way into the high school so that there is a literacy coach at the high school level at this time. We have been building math support so that we have math coaching, less intensive. It's at a lesser coach to teacher ratio than literacy, but we have math coaching through the middle schools. With this and with rearranging some of the existing positions, we will begin to provide more science, more STEM coaching support at the elementary levels as well. And it will allow us to reassign some of the existing positions to bring math coaching into the high school level as well. We're really beginning to get to the model that we anticipated, that we will, it's taken 12 years, but we're really getting close to having the level of coaching that we feel would be sufficient, that would get us to saturation, so that we've got coaches in place around literacy, around mathematics, around science, and at all grade levels. And then much smaller numbers. This budget also includes an additional assistant coach, particularly targeted towards the girls' swim team. And it includes increased money for both pool time and ice time. Guilford Public Schools, we do not own our own pool. We do not own our own ice rink. We do, however, have both hockey and swim teams. Parents of those students have traditionally, historically picked up some of the cost. This doesn't remove that cost from all of the parents, but it goes towards reducing that parent contribution. All of the items on this page total up to $409,500. It's approximately 0.6%. So as we look at this budget and as we look at the total increase of 5.18%, 5.18%, only 0.6 of that falls into the discretionary areas that we believe are important to support the students and the work that they are doing as we move forward and again continue to move through the pandemic. To look at that, to look at where we've prioritized those initiatives, to look at where we have looked at new staffing this year, we focused on the teachers. We have focused on the classroom. There are no new investments proposed in the administrative area. in the para or clerical area or in the custodial area this year. Those investments are focused in the classrooms because that is the front line, and those are the folks who are most directly supporting the students, again, as they continue to move through this pandemic. And I do want to talk about that a little bit. I do want to make clear that while this budget, oftentimes when you look at this last slide, you'll see that there are both additions and reductions, and we have a net at the bottom. It's unusual for us to bring forward only additions on this staffing slide, but there's a reason for that. The reason is that the pandemic is exacerbating needs. And I want to go back to that historic spending, the slide that I showed in the beginning. Those last 6 or 7 years, we have worked really diligently over the last several years to ensure that we're bringing forward responsible and lean budgets. Now, I want to go back to that budget, the budget assumptions. We look at the existing resources before we ask for new resources. Over the last several years, we have been making reductions in teacher areas. We have reduced FTEs in the area of elementary classroom teachers, elementary and middle school world language, PE, music, math, and English language arts at the middle school level. In all of those areas, in response to declining enrollment, we've been reducing FTEs. At the same time, as we've seen lessening needs in those areas, we have been investing those human resources in other areas. We brought full day kindergarten into the school district years ago. We have increased contact time and staffing around elementary art. We've increased the number of school psychologists and social workers and special education teachers district-wide. You know that we've been slowly and intentionally building that coaching cohort that we talked about, and we have added instructional support for teachers around the area of instructional technology. Certified teachers who happen themselves to be experts in using technology, who help teachers blend that technology into their classrooms. And the net of those reductions in investments is that we have 10.5 fewer teaching positions since 14-15. We've not only been reallocating positions into these other important areas of need, but we've been reducing positions overall. And so when we move into this year then, and when we look at this historically large request, as Dr. Balistraci said, we know that this is an increase bigger than we've usually brought. There's real context to that. It comes on the heels of those 6 or 7 really lean budget years. It comes at the end of thoughtful reduction of the teacher workforce. It comes in a year where we're being impacted by a single unusually large medical increase, as well as other multiple increases that are happening in smaller areas, but those smaller areas add up. The investments we did not feel comfortable simply stepping away from. Our students have needs this year. Our students have needs every year, but they are exacerbated this year by the experience of the last 3 school years. Those investments all totaled up impact the overall request by less than 1%, closer to 0.5%. And then this becomes the real bottom driving line for the budget that you see in front of you. We know that when costs increase, to keep budgets low, you have to decrease services. And we had long and thoughtful conversations about, do we control or do we offset the increased costs by making reductions? That's simple budgeting. If the costs are going up, you have to reduce your expenditures. This is not a year to reduce services to students. We don't have a padded budget. We didn't have anywhere to go to make cuts other than increasing class sizes or reducing mental health supports or reducing or eliminating extracurriculars. And this is not the time to do any of those. Students need the academic support. Students absolutely need the mental and emotional support that we offer. And they also need the joy and the fun of school. It was not a year to reduce costs in an effort to balance that request. So with all of that, I will turn it back. Sorry. We also have a capital request. There is a capital bonding request. I was thinking we were talking about the operational budget. Last year, I believe we had a bonding request that was closer to $6 million. This year, our bonding request includes a number of renovations and comes in at $3,885,391. It includes renovations to the high school tennis courts, the Baldwin kitchen, the Cox Library. It does include work on the playground area at Lakes. I want to be clear that the community at Lakes is fundraising to cover the costs of the grades 1 through 4 portion of that playground, just as every other neighborhood did at our 3 other elementary schools. This portion covers the pre-K and kindergarten portions, and Lakes does host a district-wide pre-K program. It made sense to us that since part of this program services the whole district, that the whole community would cover the cost of that expense. It also includes monies to complete the renovations to the 2nd floor, the office areas of 595 New England Road, what some people still refer to as the science wing. And what we're excited about is that this would allow us to put, by completing those renovations and by moving the central office functions into that space, it would allow us to bring all of our central office functions into one space. Currently, we've got central office administrative personnel in 3 different locations because we don't have a location large enough for all of us. It would put all of us in one area. It would put all of us on the campus with 1/3 of our student population. And it would return Lathrop House, which the schools have been using at no cost for, I think it's going on 20 years, 30 years that we've been using that property. By moving on to 595, which is also a town-owned property, but that sits on school property, it would remove us from Lathrop House on the green, and that property would return to the tax rolls for the town. So with all of that being said, I will turn it back over to Dr. Balistraci to sort of make closing comments. And then, of course, we're happy to answer any questions and have conversation with you about this proposed budget tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Really, this is, you hear us do this every year. I think it's really just an important reminder every year of the return on investment that the spending brings to our students and to our community. You know, oftentimes my predecessor in this role, Bill Bloss, and I certainly took up the approach from him, would come to you with numbers on where we stand in terms of spending per pupil in the state. Those numbers are a little harder to come by over the last couple of years. The pandemic has really impacted the ability to assess things in the way they've been assessed before. So I will go back 2 years to tell you that while we are one of the top school districts in the state of Connecticut, we continue to be in the middle of 169 districts in per pupil spending. And I don't think I have to convince this group of the kinds of returns we see on that investment. We have continued to be at the top of school-based, state-based evaluations, standardized test scores. We have some of the highest state accountability scores on those measures. We have students being placed in colleges and universities across the country. We have students excelling in our arts programs. I'm sure many of you have attended the amazing concerts and theater productions and seen the fine arts displayed in our schools, and have also cheered on many of our teams to regional and state championships. We've also had, as you know, pretty important attention to COVID-19 response and instructional approaches to help our students along. I'm going to take the opportunity, even a year out, to say kudos to Mrs. Trudeau and our administration and business team who got us through a year last year of COVID spending that did not require a request for additional funds. But we are now investing, as Dr. Freeman said, in helping our kids after and hopefully at the tail end of a very challenging 2 years. So I thank you for allowing us to present the budget here tonight. And as Dr. Freeman said, we are open to answering all of your questions.
Dr. Bells, Tracy, Dr. Freeman, thank you very much. As always, very good synopsis of the Board of Education budget for 22-23. I do want to very quickly just remind the board, I know Dr. Freeman and Dr. Balstrase, and I know you would both be more than willing to answer questions from us, whatever we fire at you in terms of questions or comments. I do want to remind the board that in the sake of time, I don't want to go into too much detail. We do have a town presentation to go through as well. So we will have plenty of time to have discussion about the Board of Education budget, about the bonding requests that are going to be made. With that, though, I do want to just open it up to maybe 2-3 questions if anybody has any. I do have one, and then we can entertain maybe 2 more, and then we're going to go on to the town, just in respect of time. And then, of course, at the end of the meeting, I'll recap, dates and everything else that are going to be important for the town to know. My one question is that I did see that the Board of Education looked at the superintendent's budget, and it went from 5.9 to 5.18% increase. So it did go down. It's, I believe, reducing the budget's what I'm seeing here, $446,500, which is a pretty substantial decrease from what I've seen in the past. Obviously, with the increase that you do have and justifiable, it's a pretty big amount that you had reduced. One of those amounts was the school administration elementary assistant principal that came out. I know that was a pretty large amount of that, but I don't want to go into, I guess, too much depth on why that decision was made. But I did hear during our budget deliberations, or not deliberations, our joint meetings,
Yes.
I should say.
Yep.
That was an important position and that was reduced. Could you provide any insight to that? I know Dr. Freeman had mentioned that it was very much focused on not administration, but the teaching. And did that hold true with that particular position? I'm assuming.
Great question. Thank you. And I think really what happened is we looked at 5.9% and really felt strongly that in respect and with respect to the community that supports us, certainly financially and in so very many ways, that even with some of these drivers, the medical benefits, especially, that we needed to find a way to try to bring this budget down. So looked very carefully at the investments that Dr. Freeman and the administration brought to us, and wanted to make sure that we kept things like the special education teacher. We're seeing increases in the number of children identified. There's a real correlation to needing specifically someone to address that. Removing the social worker from the ESSER grant is both prioritizing, again, mental health, but also trying to keep in mind, as the ESSER grant funds are no longer available to us, that we are able to, as Dr. Freeman mentioned, absorb those positions. And really, again, in thinking about teaching and instruction, wanting to support a STEM coach. We've had such a successful experience with literacy and math coaches in the district. We've certainly heard recently some interest in paying greater attention to science. This is going to allow us to do some real vertical planning across grades and schools. And so I think when we looked at all the positions, it was really just a matter of saying, of the positions of the investments we're being asked to consider, and keeping in mind trying to bring down this increase, we're going to ask to defer the assistant principal.
Thank you. Appreciate the thoughtful and detailed answer.
So
Anybody else?
I've got questions, of course, Mike. If you want to give me one or not, I'll ask one.
Yeah, go ahead, John. Yeah.
All right, I guess I'll ask about the mastery diploma. I got to attend a meeting and got to see an interesting conversation among the board about how to handle the mastery diploma requirements. I'm not sure I have a perfect understanding of them, but I was asking some questions a little later when I got to talk to Dr. Friedman. From what I understood, there's kind of a proposal that says, hey, to handle these requirements, what we think we need is 2.4 FTEs. But it was also discussed that there's a possibility to sort of handle the requirement another way and maybe give teachers stipends to help students, I think, with monitoring and support of these new requirements after school. And then, I got to talk to Dr. Freeman a little bit too, and he did mention that some schools are just going to purely integrate it into their current staff. And I guess part of this question was just kind of bring it to the attention of the board that, maybe there's a couple of different ways to handle this. Some cost less than others. It looks like the 2.4 FTEs would probably be the most expensive way to handle the new requirements. But I think a good question might be for Dr. Freeman, because he did tell me he had some interest in at least looking at some of the top tier schools to see, what their plans were to attack this new requirement. I don't know if you had time to start getting some feedback, but maybe you could see how some great schools, maybe like Cheshire, as an example, it might be handling this new requirement, and if they're just going to integrate it into the current staff, or they're going to do some hiring.
Yeah, so we are looking at a number of other schools. We are listening to feedback from parents and students who participated in the first semester of the rollout that is built on this model. I would note that 2.4 staff members, we believe, is an appropriate number. It's not the most expensive way to do it. I could certainly come up with a more expensive way of doing this. We believe that is the cost of doing it, and doing it thoughtfully and well, even if we go back and make some adjustments and think about what that model will look like, which we always do. I will note that there are a number of different school districts that are doing this in different ways, and a number of them aren't necessarily showing increases in staffing. That could be for a number of reasons. It could be because they're avoiding reductions in other ways. Remember, we're already down teachers across the school district. I will tell you that there's always opportunities, and we've done this several times in our own past experience, where we've brought a new mandate or a new offering into the system and said, and we don't need to bring new staff on because we would otherwise be reducing staff this year, but we can use those staff to cover these new programs. We did that repeatedly as we brought special education programming in district. There were many times that we came before you and said, we're going to be beginning a new special education program, and we don't have to add staff because we're going to readjust the staff that we have. We don't find ourselves in that situation this year, and that is why we need to ask for those additional staff to be brought on board. We're going to look at other models. We're going to take feedback from students and kids. We may adjust the model that we have in place, but the conversation that the board had on Monday night was that to do this and to do it well is going to require some investment. It's going to require, so the total dollar allocation for this new requirement is $125,000. Right now, if you look at that in FTEs, that would represent 2.4 FTEs coming in at the beginning teacher salary. We think that's a reasonable allocation to meet this new state requirement. And I do have to tell you that the way in which we will meet it is still in flux, because that's the way we do everything. We design the best way we think we need to, and then we take feedback and we make adjustments moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else on the Board of Finance have any?
If I may,
There's
Mr. Chairman.
one more allocated question.
Just, yeah, well, speaking of allocations.
Sure. Go ahead, Bob.
Good evening. We all know that you're in a rapidly changing area. Nothing stays still for long. But, I think we've covered this and we've bumped into this in the past. You mentioned the drop in 10.4 FTEs from 14-15 till now. And then, but only 1 year's change in number of students. So just for, and I'm looking for apples where probably only other fruit exists. But if we could get a handle, just so people understand better about student teacher ratios, class sizes over the years, or, it might actually better illustrate the gap that the needs of COVID and other things have presented to us.
Appreciate that question. We can certainly cut in a slide for the next presentation at the town meeting level. Last year, we had a slide that did compare the student decrease to the teacher decrease. When you talk about class sizes, I know that we looked at Westport earlier this year. I wanted to get a sense of class size ratios. Class sizes in Westport, Connecticut, and that's the kind of school system that we benchmark ourselves against. To Dr. Balistrasi's point, we perform at a very similar comparable level as Westport. We don't spend per student to the level that they spend, but the average elementary class size in Westport is approximately 22 students. The average elementary class size in Guilford is about 19 students. And so, we've made adjustments, but we have continued to prioritize that classroom. I appreciate the question, and we can make sure that when we present to you and to the town next, we'll have a visual that will highlight that more specifically.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you again, Dr. Balistrasi, Dr. Freeman, at our future meetings in March for the budget, both the budget meeting, the presentations and the workshops. We'll have plenty of opportunity to grill you on other items in the budget, but thank you very much for your presentation and justifications and your comments.
Thank you for all your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'd like to now move on to agenda item number 7, which is to receive the proposed town budget for fiscal year 2022-2023. And at this time, hand the virtual floor over to our first selectman, Matthew Coe. And I'm also assuming
Thank you.
you'll be sharing
Thank you,
your
Mr. Chairman.
screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trey, can you share your screen so Karen can run the slide presentation? Okay, we're gonna need to go back. There we go. I can't talk that fast. Perfect. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. It's my pleasure to submit the Board of Selectmen's budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022 and ending on June 30th, 2023. Can't believe I'm using those numbers, but this proposed budget includes the town operating and capital budgets, as well as the town and school combined debt service budget. I'd just like to note that this budget, like the previous 4, was unanimously voted out of the Board of Selectmen for your consideration to send to the voters. I and my colleagues believe this budget successfully balances our objectives of providing the necessary resources for essential town services and programs to protect the health and safety of our citizens, maintain capital assets and infrastructure, and improve our quality of life while maintaining fiscal responsibility and property tax stability. If you would indulge me for a moment, a couple of thanks to make. First off, to my colleagues, I believe 3 of the 4 are actually participating in this meeting, Sandy, Charlie, and Lou, for their collaboration and their insights in preparing this budget. Additionally, I'd also like to thank the Board of Finance members who participated in our capital budget presentations and in our departmental level presentations. And your participation was helpful in particularly when considering the questions that you folks asked in making our final deliberations. I'd also like to thank the staff, particularly department heads, for the work they do preparing these budgets every year. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, but equally as important, the work of Mary Jane and Karen for getting this presentation ready and hopefully making this a cogent presentation. The last one, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege. This is the first time in 30 years that Ken Garriman is not part of these deliberations. As I believe most of you on the board, I think all of you on the board have served, with the exception of Amy, have served with Ken, and he did yeoman's work over the years. He participated in 29 of these budgets, and I think that needs to be noted. Changing the guard, changing of an era. So my thanks to Ken for all he had done. You guys have seen this slide. Mission of our town government, relatively simple. Public safety protection, moving on to infrastructure, town services, support, which I think is essential. We have long been involved with one budget that the voters get to vote on. So it has always been my belief that we need to present a unified front and that we need to support the Board of Education to the degree possible. The other things we want to touch on and are responsible for are ensuring the quality of life. And some of the ways we do that is through economic development and tourism. So moving on to some of our budget objectives and key factors. These may also look somewhat familiar to you. Obviously, maintaining high level of services, face of increased demand, uncertainty in state funding. There is some good news on the state funding this year. This is the second year of the biennial budget. And the ECS funds are flat. Last year's budget deliberations at the legislature put a temporary halt to the implementation of the revamping of ECS formulas. So we are held harmless this year over last year. And also the municipal revenue sharing grant, which at this time last year, we did not know would be part of the budget. That was actually part of the the biennial budget. So we're going to also, based on the fact that I've had conversations with the legislative leadership, we can count on those funds being here as well. Assuring appropriate staffing levels, associated support, particularly through the COVID-19 pandemic. And you'll see later on, we were using some ARPA funds to accommodate that, but there were also some general increases relative to supporting our staff. We are also funding the pension and OPEB liabilities at the actuarial recommended levels, while adapting the, as we heard earlier, the lower discount rate as we went from 6 to 5 3/4. We continue to invest in maintaining our infrastructure and roads, largely through our public works organization. We have also made commitments to protect the tax relief programs for the elderly and disabled, while continued investment in information technology. This year, you'll see some increases there, largely around licensing, software licensing for the services that we traditionally use, as well as some of the new packages that we're rolling out. We have basically flatline capital funding within the operating budget. And this year, we are proposing that this is a budget without reliance on the revenues from unassigned fund balance, which last year was 50,000, down from the previous year, 250,000. And we're recommending that we don't take anything from unassigned fund balance. Next up, some of the other key factors. Demographic shifts continue to drive increased demand on our senior and social services. There are significantly higher participation programs at social services. And you'll also see that we are going to need to subsidize the senior meal program. And this is specifically COVID related. Obviously our debt service numbers are very positive this year. We're on the backside of what might be referred to as the Guilford High School bonding cliff. After many years of having to defend the increases because of the commitments we made several years ago, we're finally seeing a decrease on some debt costs. We, similar to the Board of Education, are faced with significant increases in our healthcare. We are up by about 17%, or a little about $610,000. And that's you'll see that that's a significant piece of the increases that we have that we're asking for. Additionally, the staff levels are increasing by half a position. That's really going from a part-time to a full-time position. In terms of a summary for the operating budget, the numbers are pretty simple. Town operating budget is increasing by 5.34%. When you roll in our capital budget at 0.4, we're at a total operating budget of 5.15%. I will comment that we had some significant discussions, and this 5.15% is after we made some reductions to the request from our department heads. We, like the Board of Education, were concerned about the big numbers, and at 5.15%, that's a big number. But one thing that's important to know is without the dramatic medical cost increases, which we haven't seen for the past 5 years, this budget increase would be a 3.27% increase. Moving on to debt and total budget, the debt service is going down, as I had mentioned. When you combine that with the total operating budget, we're at 3.53%. And then once again, if you took out the significant increase in healthcare costs, that number would be down in the 2% range, like the Board of Education would be without their healthcare costs as well. One thing I want to make note of, the debt service numbers projected here includes anticipated issuances for projects that we've already approved and implemented, but will be going out for bonding this summer. Like the Board of Education, we made some reductions to our budgets. And I'd like to say we had one spot or a couple of spots to go to, but the methodology we used was we went department line by department line in our 2 budget workshops that we conducted with the Board of Selectmen. And no one was spared the axe, if you will. There were some departments that were not impacted at all because they brought in either no increase or they decreased their budget request year over year. There are, however, some major increases, to the town budget. And this is sort of lumping those together as opposed to specific line items. Total salaries is increasing by 4.43%. And that's largely a result of contractual obligations, including year 2 of the compression and the enhancement that we negotiated with the Guilford Education Association to be more competitive with our neighboring communities and to basically guarantee a fair living wage to our lower level employees. Also to be noted here is we, like many small businesses in the town of Guilford, are impacted by the gradual increase to minimum wage. As you probably recall, we hire a significant number of temporary seasonal employees, and many of those are below or are affected by the gradual implementation to get to a $15 an hour minimum wage. Purchase service employee benefits, I think we talked about already. one of the, I gave you a number of 609,000. You saw a number of 609,000 on healthcare costs alone. But what you see reflected here is that our pension contributions declined based on the strength of the returns on our assets. And that's kudos to our pension committee for the effective management of those funds. Purchase services lumps in a couple of things, some utility and fuel costs going up. Water, our public water supply numbers are going up, in addition to a significant increase in the cost for providing fire hydrants. And then just general purchase services, like we are all facing in our household budgets, supply chain and the cost of inflation is driving the things we buy on a regular basis, supplies and materials. It's driving those costs even higher. As to the increases in employee benefits, we've pretty much gone through this. Retirement plan contributions, as I mentioned, are dropping by over $100,000. Medical benefits goes up by the $609,000, and that's where we get to that $501,000 increase in the benefits line items. One of the things I want to talk about, I know Dr. Freeman mentioned this earlier, but in 2016, 2017, when we're starting to talk about, I want to talk about the healthcare costs. In 2016, 2017, our actual claims on the healthcare were $13,233,000. Our projected claims for fiscal year 21-22, the year we're in right now, is $11,325,000. So as Dr. Freeman noted, some of the things that we have done over the years, in particular the introduction of the HSAs, allowed us to see a significant a decline in our actual healthcare costs. Well, we've taken all of that out of the system, and we are now faced with the traditional increases in healthcare costs that most municipalities and most businesses and many of you who have private insurance plans have seen, 5 to 7 to 10% increases consistently over the years. So the good work we did has put us in a position where we are still anticipating paying less for healthcare than we did 5 years ago. Just to talk a little bit about some of the increases in the operating budget, youth and family services, largely that's related to salaries. Some of those salary costs have been offset by ARPA, but not all of them. Park and recreation, that also is salaries. They were dramatically impacted by some of the changes in the GEA salary structure and the compression of some of the steps. Utilities and field maintenance are also big drivers for their budget this year. Police department, it's primarily salaries and fuel costs. Unfortunately, we went out to bid in November. Would have been nicer to have gone out to bid last July, but we saw a dramatic increase in fuel costs, and that's affecting multiple departments, but in particular the police department. Town properties, this is where the fire hydrant money is. $124,000 is related to increased costs with Connecticut Water for water rate increases and increases to the hydrants to protect our community. The fire department, these numbers are not as high as they might be for one reason. We only recently settled the fire department's contract for the union, and we have not been able to bake those numbers back into the salaries portion of the fire department's budget. Those numbers are still in reserve for personnel, but these are largely a result. These increases that you see here are the result of the loss of the SAFER grant. As you may recall, last year we were lucky enough to have been extended the SAFER grant into the current fiscal year, but that is out, and replacement salaries as well as vehicle maintenance are driving other costs in those areas, in that area. Employee benefits. Those numbers reflect, as I just mentioned, some of the increases for the fire department's most recently negotiated contract, and employment benefits, as we have talked about, are pretty self-evident. What is not on this page is something I want to bring up. Our Public Works Department brought in one of the leanest budgets we've seen in years. It was a 1.83% increase, which just barely covered the salary increases. So the commission and our department head, Tom Fillion, brought in a very, very lean budget. And we're all hoping that the overtime budget doesn't, those overtime budgets don't get used up with a wild snow season next year. We had some reductions in our operating budget as well. I don't need to bore you to tears with those, but economic development, ARPA funds have covered any increased costs associated with the combining of that role with the town of Madison. Capital is obviously just down a hair flat, but we didn't feel as if that was an area where we could increase given the size of the increases we're seeing in the operating budget. Legal is a tight budget. We've last couple of years we've seen a decrease in the legal budget, and that'll be real. Hopefully, it will be realized this year. One caveat: this is a reval year we're coming into. We did a 5-year analysis on the last reval cycle. So we accommodated a bump the first year after a reval goes into effect. We're hoping that the increases we have in there that we are planning on will cover them. One of the challenges is this reval has the potential to dramatically impact housing appraisals. I think I've mentioned this to some folks. I've been keeping a spreadsheet of sale prices on homes versus the appraised price. I've been doing it for not quite a year. I have a sample size of about 350 transactions, and the average increase over the appraised price, the sales price over the appraised price, is about 35%. So I think we're going to see a dramatic increase in the grand list through reval, which would most likely generate some significant numbers of appeals. Hopefully, we've got enough in there for it. We want to move on to the capital budget. Vehicles make up a pretty substantial portion of it. Equipment would be the second largest. And most of those, police department, we've got in the normal cycle of replacing vehicles, we've got about $240,000 in replacing police vehicles and the outfitting of those vehicles with all the lights, cameras, bells, and whistles that they have to put into those devices. Most of the equipment is in Public Works and Health Department. Town Properties, we're replacing a 15-year-old truck that Steve Nydorf and Public Works has been using bubble gum and baling wire to keep on the road. So there's a brand new truck for the building maintenance organization. And you also see technology. Most of the technology increases, as I mentioned earlier, are going to be in the software licensing category. As I mentioned, the capital projects funding, we've remained largely flat over the last couple of years, despite the fact that we continue to place emphasis on more pay-as-you-go. But once again, this was not a year for us to increase. We didn't think it was a year for us to increase the capital budget, given the size of the increases on the operating budget. Next, we want to identify the fact that we are proposing the use of ARPA funds, some of which you have already approved, and these are extensions of same. We're using them for additional help in the town clerk's office for ballot workers, overtime also for those ballot workers, part-time assistant building officials. What has happened is the final guidance came out from the American Rescue Plan. And there's a standard allowance now granted to municipalities for that of up to $10 million for assumed revenue loss as a result of the pandemic. And in doing so, they have then said you can use those up to $10 million on general government services, anything government would normally provide for, with the exception of debt service and pensions. So we have moved some items into this category. Some of them would be operating, and as you can see, some of them are capital. And we're suggesting that these 5 items, which would normally be in a bond request, are clearly eligible for the use of American Rescue Plan funds. Let's move on to operating revenue. As I talked earlier, you'll see you'll see a couple of items here. Well, actually, the next page you'll see at the state grants and the Board of Ed funding. Local revenues and interest income are basically the same. Building permits, we continue to see an uptick in the building permits. I don't know what it is about COVID and pandemic. It was probably that a lot of people realized they're spending more time at home and there were more things that needed to be fixed. But clearly there is a rationale for increasing what we expect to get there. Same thing with town clerk, recording fees and transaction fees as you saw your revenue reports earlier today, they are way over their projections for fiscal year 22. The balance are relatively flat. Other local, again, is up nominally. Next up is components of our bonded debt service. There's no surprise, you've seen this one before. The new high school is carrying the lion's share of our debt service payments, and followed by general projects for the schools and towns. So those numbers are probably pretty familiar to you. There is good news. Dr. Balistraci mentioned at the top, or one of her comments, that there is good news in terms of grand list growth. We saw a grand list growth of 2.23% this year. That's a number that in all my years of involvement in this arena, I've never seen a number that high. Largely around some of the housing projects, the 66 High Street, and a couple of other programs, a couple of other building developments that have taken place. But the good news is that alone generates, after budgetary adjustments, that would generate almost $2 million in additional tax revenue above and beyond what we're collecting currently. So before we talk about spending another dime or another nickel, if we were to roll our current budgets forward, we would have an additional $2 million in tax revenue coming in just on the grand list growth. One thing I do want to talk about briefly here is the governor made a proposal, and there are also some legislators who are proposing something similar, which is to drop the cap for motor vehicle taxes mill rate to 29. Currently, there is legislative action that limits the mill rate on automobile taxes to 45 mills. That's been in place for a few years. They've actually bumped it a couple of times. We've always been below that threshold, but there is a proposal to do that, to drop it to 29. The proposal includes keeping every municipality whole through funding from the state to make up the difference between 29 mills and whatever the mill rate is, which in our case today is 32.62, that the state would fund the gap in what we would lose by that restriction on taxing automobiles at 29 mills versus what our effective mill rate is. There's much more to come on that, but unfortunately, my suspicion is we won't have a definitive answer on what happens with that until well after we send this to the voters, as the legislative session does not end until early May, and our voters will be voting on this in mid-April. Just the next slide is the total grand list, which is more just for your edification as to how it splits out amongst the various categories. Noting we are still, real estate drives 87% of it. 90% of that is residential. So this is still largely what they call a bedroom tax community. And we're probably not going to change the face of that dramatically in any time in the near future. All right. As Mary Jane promised later in the slide, the Board of Selectmen estimated state grant revenues are here. And as you can see, we did not budget last year for municipal revenue share because that got baked into the legislative biennial budget after we had set ours. So those are numbers that we did not have in there. And then the other one is pilot. Last year, the state changed the way they fund payment in lieu of taxes, and we wound up with a windfall. And this is property that is either owned by a college, a healthcare organization, a nonprofit, or the state. Heretofore, we weren't receiving anything, but the new formula now gives us some additional funding. All right, if we could move to Mary Jane's favorite slide. You've all seen this for a number of years, predicting when that cliff, that fiscal cliff on debt service would happen. And as you can see it, Mary Jane made me include this slide because we've had it for so many years. So it had to go in somewhere. But as you can see, this also includes, as I mentioned to you, the projected bonding that we're going to do later this summer. All right, let me try to wrap this up. Significant budget highlights. We reduced the capital budget by $1.1 million while maintaining capital funding levels consistent with the board goals. The increases in salaries constitutes 4.43%, including the loss of the SAFER grant funding and contractual obligations. And the state funding estimates are based on a biennial budget. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to entertain a couple of questions as is traditional.
Absolutely. So I will, rather than repeat what I said for the Board of Education presentation, we'll limit any questions that we have tonight. I have one, but I'm going to ask the board if they have any first for you.
Certainly.
And regarding the presentation. And by the way, just very quickly, thank you very much again for the presentation and the detail. I would be remiss in not thanking Mary Jane, of course, and Karen for putting the presentation together just as you did. And the rest of the Board of Selectmen and the department heads, but you already did all of that. You thanked them all, but I'm sure on behalf of the Board of Finance, we would do the same. So does the board have any questions directly for our first selectman? Jonathan, go ahead.
I'll ask you one, Matt, that I think's probably pretty easy for you. I think you were talking about overtime already. I'm looking at some older numbers. Were you able to kind of pull back on the overtime? It really caught my attention. I think the fire department overtime was up 31%. And even Park and Rec, I think, was up about 25%.
Thank you, Jonathan. Mary Jane, you want to handle those two?
You're talking about the increase for this year's budget? Is that your question?
Yeah, I'm looking at some older numbers though from when we met a couple weeks back. So I thought maybe you already adjusted them.
Well, the overtime numbers are really reflective of the increases in the GA specifically and the fire department budgets. So percentage wise, we kind of take an average over a number of years and then extrapolate that. And on top of that, include the increase in salaries. So that's why that number might fluctuate year over year because of that averaging.
So is it still that those increases are still at that level?
Yes, they are. Jonathan, the overtime for the fire is currently slated at 181,000. Is that the same number you had?
Yeah, that was the number I had from the meetings a couple weeks back.
Right. We went back and asked all the department heads to take a look at those numbers. And as Mary Jane just said, it's based on rolling averages. And then some anticipated, well, not only anticipated, but we have a couple of workers comp cases at the fire department. So we are not at full staff. Well, we are at full staff, but we don't have full staff availability. They need to be replaced with replacement salaries and often with overtime.
Yep, which was a question I was gonna say for next time. Those replacement costs are running pretty high too, as usual.
Yep.
Any other?
Said Jonathan that the fire department will be represented at the public hearing, so they would have more detailed information to back that up as well.
All right, thank you.
Other questions from the board? If not, I'll jump in on one.
Certainly.
Matt, you talked about the ARPA funding, and you had capital that you had as debt service avoidance, and there were 5 items there. I don't know what those, I didn't total them up, but regardless of that amount, would those items under capital that were listed, would those have been requested as bonding from the town this year?
Mr. Chairman, as you know, that we traditionally do a 2-year bonding cycle.
Right.
So some of those, the need for some of those has been accelerated, and it was felt that holding off till this time next year to ask for those would be detrimental to the operation of those departments, particularly a new roof, some of those things. So we decided as a group that this was an appropriate use because of the new rules and regulations around the funding. So this is something that would be bonded. These would all be bonded eventually.
Right.
And so this is some debt service avoidance.
What was there any, I don't even know if this would be part of it. Could you, or could the Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen look at current approved capital projects, or would it have to be future proposed?
This was an alternative to us coming forward and asking for a bonding question
In the future?
this year.
Yeah, okay.
No, breaking our traditional 2-year cycle.
Okay. Yeah, and so that's what I was questioning, is where the debt service was being avoided. Is it this year? Was it past? It's coming up. That is
it would be coming up. Obviously, anything that we approve now traditionally doesn't hit our debt service line item for 18 months. So it would be budget cycle 23-24 that you would see the increase.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, somebody said the word bond,
Oh, yes.
so I've got to jump in.
Yep.
Are we, just out of curiosity, nobody doesn't expect higher rates. Are we talking with our financial advisors? And this might not be appropriate for this meeting, but maybe somewhere else, some other time. Are we talking to them about hedging or purchasing locks or options to preserve the rates at which we can borrow at a future time?
That is a good question, Bob. We have not. However, we are working with our bond advisors on the window of opportunity to us to refinance those that are available. And I think we have, what is it, an April window, Mary Jane?
Yeah, May, we're looking at May. The numbers are getting less and less advantageous to us. But Bob, the other thing that I'm looking into is, and who knows what will happen by August, but private funding instead of bonding.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, there are, but there are some municipalities that are going out and going to local banks for something like what we are proposing for the Board of Education, that 3.8 million, I think it was, that they are getting 5-year bank rates. I think was it Shelton that's doing that, Mary Jane? I can't remember who it was.
I don't remember. I've done it in past. I haven't done it in Guilford, but in the past I've done private funding when that has been more advantageous. And if we were doing that now, that'd probably be really good, but we'll be looking at that as an option in August instead of just bonding. It'll save us considerable amount in bonding costs.
And costs and fees, yeah. There's
Yes.
a lot of liquidity in the banks. It's interesting. Thank you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Bob, just a quick question, if you might. You're talking about options against future rate increases, future.
Yeah, locks, or options is certain, well, you can buy hedges or you can buy options or locks, they're called. I'm not terribly familiar with it municipal in the
Yeah,
world of municipalities.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say, I'm not familiar with that at all. I've never heard anybody talk about that. I'm not sure if municipalities are able to do that, but I'll certainly ask our advisors.
Thank you.
Jeff, did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Just I saw your box light up. I just want to make sure. I think we've asked our 3 allotted questions.
Mr. Chairman, if you can indulge me for a minute, I think I forgot to mention that Sue Renner is also here tonight. My apologies. So now that I have a full screen with everybody on it, instead of the 4 that are in the little column on the side of my screen. So my apologies, Sue.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a question. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah.
Were you going to talk about the overall impact that is what was presented tonight?
Yes.
Related, because we saw some pretty scary numbers.
Yeah.
But as we also talked about, the grand list growth is going to significantly mitigate the impact of those budgets that were presented tonight. So I didn't know if you wanted to cover it, but I'd be happy to give a thumbnail as to where this puts us. But I know you might have access to the same information I do.
I've plugged in numbers, so I'm gonna put them out there, and then I know that you and Mary Jane could probably correct me if there's any error in those. Before we do that, I want to just move on, but I'm going to do that under, I guess I'll do it under new business, because there's a whole number of issues that I want to make sure to bring up. Jonathan, I just saw your hand.
Yeah, just as more of a very general question, I know that the Board of Selectmen was considering options for medical, and given the situation with our medical costs going up so much, has there been any yield from that? Is there any perspective of finding some kind of lower medical option?
Jonathan, that's a great question. On the threat of going out to recast it, Anthem came back and reduced the rate. So the lasering that we were talking about doing earlier,
Yes,
is no longer, we're no longer at risk of.
Okay.
So a recommendation from our insurance consultant is to take the revised rates from Anthem and go out for 23-24, give ourselves a window of time to do this in a thoughtful and manner, and put something out probably in the fall. Give ourselves the opportunity to go to a more full market.
Is there current cost now reflected in these budgets? Or
Yes,
will
it
there
is.
be an adjustment? Oh, it's already in there. Okay.
What has happened, Jonathan, is the assumed risk, the potential assumed risk of that 600,000 we talked about in that briefing with the consultant is no longer that size.
Definitely positive.
Yes, it is.
Did they also bring down our rates generally, or was it just the lasering issue that's off the table?
The lasering issues affected the stop loss premiums.
Okay, but no reduction in the premiums from where we're at before. No. Okay, but the lasering can help because that opens us up to, as you said, $600,000 potential liability, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if we're all set on item number 7, I'm going to move on. Before I do that, for both the Board of Education and the town, Dr. Freeman and, the Board of Selectmen posted the town on our board pack, the presentation. So we have that. When I was looking at the Board of Education budget, I'm trying to see, there's pages here, but I didn't see the presentation. Would you be able to share the presentation that you made tonight with us?
Yes, we'll get you this slide deck that we shared tonight, and we will also add that to our website information tomorrow as well.
Great, that'd be fantastic. And I know we would see it later on, but just so we get a little bit of a head start on that. Great, thank you. Okay, item number 8 is committee reports, building permits. Anything on building permits? Probably not. Item number 9 is old business. I didn't have anything to bring up under old business. Unless you want to call deliberating or discussing the budgets as old business, but we'll just do that under new business.
Got a question for you on that, old business.
Yeah, go ahead.
Still considering doing the tour of the town?
Yes.
Okay.
Good. Actually, that's a good question. We were still holding off until better weather. I think that probably it would be April or May. I could put that at, we could put that under old business to revisit a date for a tour of the facilities with the facility committee.
All right.
But we did want to wait until some better weather and some lighter some daylight when we could go. So it's not necessarily during a work day, but maybe after work that we could take a tour before one of our meetings.
Yeah, I hope we keep it on the radar. I don't think I've made it to every town facility yet, so maybe I'll hit a hope.
No, that's great. I appreciate you bringing that up. So we'll put that under old business. So thank you. Okay. Item number 10 is new business. So I have a number of comments here, and then I'll open up to anybody else's new business just to wrap things up. There was a lot covered tonight, and we're going to have a lot to obviously discuss, but I'm going to kind of throw everything into a summary as best as I can. What we heard this evening regarding the budgets, as I look at my notes in very small writing, the Board of Education has proposed a budget of $65,629,734. And that is reflecting a 5.18% increase in the previous budget. On debt service, we've heard a number being proposed of $10,264,901. That is a decrease in 1.5% from the previous year. And on the town budget, which includes operating and includes capital, the amount being proposed is $34,018,909, and that is reflecting a 5.15% increase in the previous year's budget. If you take all of what I just said and you add it all together, the current change or increase in the budget is I almost said 9.1, it's 4.51%. What we also heard is that the grand list has gone up 2.23%. Non-tax revenue has gone up to the amount of, and I didn't do a percentage on this, but it's 774, that north of $774,000. And we do not, and this is assuming, by the way, that we do not use fund balance. This is just an assumption. What we are looking at, had there not been the grand list increase that we experienced, would be looking at about a 4.7% mill rate or tax increase. That's if the grand list did not go up. Right now, we are looking at a mill rate increase, according to the calculations I've done, and I will certainly be corrected if I'm wrong. Right now is 1.91% is the amount. So you've heard, we've all heard, the public will hear as this goes onto public airwaves. A 4.51% increase in the budgets, but an increase in the tax mill rate amount of 1.91%. We are very fortunate, timing wise, that we've had the grand list increase that we've had. I do want to say one thing about that grand list. That doesn't happen just by, oh, well, geez, we got lucky this year. There are a lot of factors that go into it, but the development of this town has been smart. And it has a lot to do with the predecessors that have come before us. You know, although the budgets are higher than what we all would like to see, we are very fortunate that we have planned in a way as a town, not me personally or not any of us personally, but all of us as a town have really grown responsibly, and it is really coming to bear now. And like I said, there's a lot of different factors for that. The economy, the supply and demand of housing in Connecticut that is incredibly attractive has helped push prices, but we've also had very smart development. So I do want to add that in. And with that, I just wanted to give a summary of where we stand on mill rate versus the budgets that have been presented, which is much better news than I think any of us would have thought literally before the grand list numbers came in at the end of January. So before I go into more of the schedule and timing and some last minute logistics, does anybody have anything else to add? Excellent. Oh,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
thank you for that summary, and your numbers are all exactly on point. One of the things that I think needs to be discussed, and we'll talk about this as we go forward, but we are at a pretty unique time in terms of economic news. We have the 40-year high in terms of inflation, running around 7.5%. The gross domestic product, I think, is growing at about a 5.7% rate. So it's not surprising that things are going to cost more, and people are expecting higher costs for everything. We also had, I think we saw this year, the single largest increase in Social Security benefits of 5.9%. So against the backdrop of some of those numbers, I think that the 1.91% tax increase based on what's in this budget and what we are getting for this budget is pretty reasonable. So I can hopefully help make that case with the voters going forward.
Thank you for that.
A question.
Oh, Veronica, yeah, go ahead.
Do we happen to know what the unemployment rate is currently in Guilford? Or can we get it if we don't know it?
I can get it. I'll reach out. I haven't looked at those numbers in a while. I don't want to guess because we had dramatically changed the curve from June of 2020. By the end of I had some numbers around the end of 21, but that's not at the end of 20. Excuse me, the end of 2020. The numbers were dramatically better than they were in June. And then I had some numbers last night, but I don't want to quote them. I'll find them for you.
Thank you.
It's clearly below the statewide rate, and it's much closer. It's also below the federal rate. That much I remember.
The Department of Labor has us at 2.6.
Nice job, Mary Jane.
What is the benchmark point of that?
The state of Connecticut is 4.4.
Oh, I'm sorry. As of when is it? How current is that?
December.
December. Okay, so the end of the year. Okay, great.
That's what's current. That's what's current on the Department of Labor website.
Right. Which is probably about as current as we'll get.
It's all I got for you.
That's all you got.
Pretty good though.
Enough for now. Okay. If nothing else, I want to just kind of talk about schedule and some logistics about our process. Our public budget hearing, our annual public budget hearing will be on Tuesday, March 8th at 7:30 p.m. We expect, or I expect, that there will be public forum after the presentations are made again by the town and the Board of Education. At this point, that meeting will be virtual. We do not intend on meeting in person for that meeting or the subsequent meeting, which will be the Board of Finance budget workshop, which is where we will deliberate on the budgets and what should be presented to the town for a vote. And that is scheduled on Thursday, March 10th, also at 7:30. And should we need it, which usually we don't, usually doesn't go to workshops. Although we hold the date in case of one year, we had a snowstorm on the day of the workshop. And I learned that lesson a while back when I planned a vacation, thinking, oh, I won't have to be at that second meeting. And guess what? I never plan anything now for that one. That would be on Monday, March 14th, should we need it. Only if needed, if we don't come up with a decision on Thursday, March 10th. So all those meetings are at 7:30. There will be public forum at both workshops. I think it's good to have the Board of Finance hear the public's comments before and after. And it is possible that both nights will be utilized, as I said. Public comments. Over the last couple of years, it's been unique based on the fact that we've been virtual. I think it's fortunate that we're able to vote in person as opposed to 2 years ago, which we could not do. But as far as public comment, I think we leaned as a board specifically to the point that we've learned how to do this well enough that it's a little bit easier to do public comment and have the public hear our meetings and provide comment in this format as opposed to a mixed hybrid format, which we've learned is a little bit more difficult. Watching the Board of Selectmen be a little bit of the guinea pigs in this. And we've had a couple of meetings in person. And then when we had the spike in the cases on COVID, we followed the lead of the Board of Education and went back to virtual. And I think that this way, I'm looking at all of you on the screen, and I'm not looking at a table of 7 people and trying to squint and see who's on the camera and who's not. So I think we all feel a little bit more comfortable going this way with the virtual meetings, both in the public hearing and the workshops. So there will be Zoom links, and we will hold these meetings just as we have the last 2 years. We would have loved to gotten into a room in person this year, but I think on behalf of the board, I think we would all agree that this is a better way to get the public comment and the public viewing of how this all comes to shape. Matt, I saw your pen go up, so
yeah,
if you'd like to.
Yeah, Mike, I just want to alert you to the fact that tomorrow the audiovisual company that was working on doing the Zoom room at the community center is supposed to turn that system over to us. So you would have potentially the opportunity to do a hybrid. And one of the reasons I bring that up is on my screen, the individual that's just above you is Dr. Freeman. And he and Katie Balistraci and the Board of Education will probably be having to render some decision relative to masks in schools. And there may be, just cautioning, there may be some pushback in the community that if we're making kids go to schools without masks, why is the town not having in-person meetings or at least hybrid meetings? So just want to put that in the arena for possible consideration. I'm not guessing or surmising what Dr. Freeman and the Board of Education are going to do around the masks, but if the decision comes out that kids are going to be in school on March 8th without masks on, but the Board of Finance doesn't think they should be together to have a meeting, I'm not sure that that is a real good optic.
My, if I could just respond to that, and then Mary Jane, if my only response to that would be, that might be the case. But I think as a board, we want to make it as easy as possible for the public to be able to view and ask questions and comment. And I would say that in past meetings, I've seen a lot more virtual attendance and virtual participation than we've had in person. I hate to say that, but it seems to have been the case. If it turns out that maybe that's a better way, I would certainly entertain it. But at this particular moment, I'm just thinking to do what would be easiest for the public to view and to comment on. And I think we're in that real gray area right now between meeting in person and meeting hybrid and meeting virtually completely. So I do definitely appreciate your comments, and I definitely would love to meet in person. I just I'm wondering if that wouldn't be more difficult to do hybrid and have some people be on camera and have some people be in person. But I'm glad the room is going to be done. I will tell you that is great news. I'm very happy to hear that. Mary Jane, go ahead.
First of all, I want to say they're coming. It's not done yet. So, but we're already doing the final proof of the legal notice for your public hearing, and we currently have it as Zoom only. I'm just throwing that out there, that's how it's going to be in the paper next week.
Okay. I think we're perfect. Matt's a great point, and we, without knowing what the Board of Education is going to do, I think it's
I have a question here.
At this point, it's just prudent to be able to meet the way that we've been planning on meeting and trying to get that participation virtually. So Jonathan, go ahead.
So I got a question here. In the absence of executive orders for these restrictions, wouldn't we just follow the charter?
No, the legislature codified that we can continue to do Zoom and hybrid meetings.
Okay. So
Yeah,
there's something in the air that still allows.
That was one of the executive orders that they extended through May, whatever, early last week.
Okay. Got it.
And then the legislature also.
And all of their committee meetings, since I've been on most of them this week testifying, they're all on Zoom this date.
Yeah.
Jonathan, there's a pretty good summary in the Hartford Current and some other, some other publications about what the legislature's done and what the status of things are, if you want to get under that a little bit.
Great. The only other point or comment I want to make logistically about the budget was we were just talking about public comments, and I had a note here. I had the same note last year about being able to activate or set up a link on the homepage of the town website to make comments on the budget. I'm sure it's easy as maybe a click to receive public comment in writing by email. I would just entertain that we do that again or have that active again.
We can make that happen.
And then we'll read that into record when any of us receive anything from the public or well, actually, Tracy, you usually send them out to all of us as you get them. So does anybody have anything else under new business for the budget? I have one other item and it's real quick. Okay. As the Board of Finance probably knows, a message went out from Mary Jane regarding the fiscal year 2021 audit report. And I know that you said you have them in your office available for us to pick up. I just wanted to remind the board of that and the fact that for the public, if they want to hear the audit presentation, we will be getting a presentation from our auditors at our March regular meeting. Just a reminder. So just when you thought we might have a quick regular meeting in March, we'll have the audit presentation. So it won't be that quick. We'll still try to expedite though. Anything else under new business? Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Again, thank you, everybody who presented tonight. Thank you to the town Board of Education, all the
you.
representatives who were part of tonight. And we will see you all at our first public budget hearing on Tuesday, March 8th at 7:30 p.m. by Zoom. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Fantastic. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Night,
everyone.
Good
Night.
meeting. Nicely done.